First startup in this this sequence will be Strella. Katherine Sizov is the entrepreneur, and Nolan Paul, who's been a regular at our workshops, will be the introducer. Nolan is with Yamaha Ventures, has been a long time participant in the ag tech community. So I'm going to let you introduce Strella.
Great. Well, thank you. Yeah, I'm very excited to kick off and introduce Katherine here and Strella. We came aboard as part of their seed round. I won't steal her thunder, but this is an area that's really near and dear to my heart. And I think the novel technology and approach that Strella is taking is really exciting. I think being able to optimize freshness and quality in the produce space is becoming even more important with the emergence of brands and premium pricing. And so, I'll leave it to Katherine to tell you all what she's doing.
Thank you very much, Nolan. All right, hello everybody. My name is Katherine. I'm the founder of Strella. We are currently a 6 full-time, 2 part-time team headquartered out of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. To date, we've raised about $3.6 million from a variety of awesome investors, including Nolan from Yamaha Ventures, Catapult and Union Labs, which are 2 Kleiner and Deep Tech spinouts, and Mark Cuban. I started the company as a student at the University of Pennsylvania studying molecular biology, and was later joined by my co-founder, Jacob Jordan, who helped spearhead our first pilot efforts and eventually our first year of sales as well. So 1/3 of all food is wasted before it's consumed, and we believe that this is due to 2 inefficiencies within the food supply chain. The first one is a lack of data. There's very little information about the quality of a perishable product. And the second one is siloed supply chain players. So any data that does exist is often not handed off between players as the product moves downstream. In order to attempt to address this problem, we've created a technology that allows us to predict the ripeness of produce. And we use this information to make better supply chain decisions. So if you've ever put an unripe banana next to a ripe one, you've probably seen that it ripens a lot faster than if it was by itself. This is because fruits communicate their ripeness with each other by sensing and signaling gases. We've developed a proprietary sensor that allows us to intercept these communications between produce and determine the maturity of it. We couple this with IoT to make our customers' lives easier, as well as some data analysis in order to turn all of our information into an actionable initiative in order to make a better supply chain decision for our customers. Our initial market is in apple and pear packing, which is where fruits are stored. So you may know this, but an apple or a pear in a grocery store can actually be over a year old. And this is because the packer can store it for that long. So a typical packer that we work with has about 100 storage rooms. Each one is filled with about 5 million pieces of fruit. And the packer lacks data about where their most mature produce is located. Resultingly, they lose between 10 to 40% of their entire crop every single year. We put sensors inside these storage rooms and monitor the crop as it ripens, and we can tell a packer up to 2 months in advance of the fruit spoiling that it's going to do so. This gives the packer plenty of time to communicate with their marketing group, send the product downstream, and find a buyer for it before it goes bad. Our initial efforts have been fruitful. We currently adjust about 35% of the inventory order of a packer, and we save them anywhere between $38,000 per room per year to the entire value of a room, because sometimes really big mistakes happen also. We currently work with packers that represent 60% of the entire market for US apples and pears. And to date, we have had 0 churn on any customer. As a matter of fact, we grow about 4 times year on year. So that's where we currently are. And we're currently also exploring additional opportunities in downstream inventory management as well. This is represented by 2 additional markets. The first one is retail. Retailers currently use a system of FIFO, so first in, first out, at their distribution centers, meaning that the first truck that goes into the distribution center is the first truck of produce that is sent to the grocery store, without taking into consideration the maturity of the product at all. We are currently completing a trial with Target, a major retailer, to resequence their inventory based on maturity rather than on a FIFO basis. Our recent results are that we've resequenced over 51% of their Gala inventory and reduced their shrink by about 20% in a single month alone. The second market that we're currently pursuing is the import-export market, monitoring shipping containers of produce as they travel overseas, so that by the time the shipping container arrives at port, we can let an importer know which container contains the ripest produce. We are currently trialing with crops imports in Argentinian pears, going to Quebec in order to validate and quantify our value. So packing is our initial target market. It doesn't represent an enormous opportunity from a revenue perspective, but we chose it for some very strategic reasons. The first one is that it's a domestic market, which means it's got an easier supply chain. Secondly, it's conglomerated. As a startup, we can tackle about 40 individual players and make an impact upstream. And finally, and most importantly, packing is very reputational. So every packer that works upstream has a very strong reputation with a retailer. And as a result, it allows us to address markets that have much larger market opportunities, but that may be more difficult to penetrate otherwise. So just for this technology alone, we see a bunch of additional future opportunities. The first one is traveling through different types of produce. So our technology can be applied to a variety of other produce such as avocados, kiwis, mangoes, melons, etc. Secondly, we see expansion into other geographies as well. Europe, South America, and Australasia represent very large market opportunities for us. And thirdly, traveling both upstream and downstream in the supply chain to various players. So one example of this is e-commerce. It's very easy for an e-commerce provider to provide a static commodity object like a paper towel, but it's very difficult to get that perfect avocado delivered to the customer every single time. And we see that as a potential opportunity where Strella could help. As a broad vision, we see Strella as a data provider for all types of data that allow us to connect various players within the supply chain and eliminate those two inefficiencies within the supply chain that cause waste. We will be likely fundraising our Series A in December of this year and are actively looking for potential partners and connections, whether that's in retail, importing, and packing. So if you know anybody, please feel free to reach out and let me know. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Katherine. Do we have questions? And I think people should feel free to ask questions directly as well as in the chat room if you prefer. So while we're waiting, Katherine, maybe you can talk a little bit about your product roadmap. I mean, you've talked about apples. What other produce are sort of the key drivers of success for you going forward?
Yeah, sure. So we aim to eliminate shrink from primarily the top 9 producers of ethylene gas, which actually happen to contribute about 1/3 of all the total food waste. So those include apples, pears, avocados, bananas, kiwis, kind of the day-to-day fruits and vegetables that we purchase at the grocery store.
And is the gas that you're measuring primarily ethylene, or what is it that you're measuring with your sensors?
Yes, we primarily measure ethylene gas, and then we correlate that to the maturation of the fruit. We also measure other variables such as temperature and humidity, but yes, our kind of main core intellectual property is around ethylene.
Carson, you're on the screen. Looks like you have a question.
I do. Very cool. We have multiple commodities in our facility at any one time and may have multiple commodities in a cold storage facility. So how do you differentiate between the spoilage of commodities that may have been harvested on a different day or may just be entirely different?
Yeah, so we work with each customer to determine what type of resolution is most useful. So for example, in apple and pear packing, the packer makes the decision on the whole room resolution. And so even if there are multiple lots per se, the packer is moving that volume of fruit. And so we make decisions based on that. On the retail end, typically things are done on a pallet level basis. And so we provide resolution on the pallet level in terms of maturity. Does that make sense? Also, I mean, obviously, like ethylene works as a kind of crosstalk, right? So if you do have something that's far more ripe, that's kind of interacting with something that could have stored a little longer, it's important to know the ethylene values of the lesser product, if that makes sense.
But so your sensors are going, in some cases, pallet by pallet then. So you put a sensor in each pallet.
Yep, so the ultimate goal is to have an IoT sensor in every single pallet of produce.
Right, okay. Craig.
Hi, thank you for the presentation. A question about ethylene gas, I guess. Does it actually accelerate the ripening? And if so, by sensing that and then ventilating an area, could you actually extend the life of some fruit?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really, really good question. So yes, fruits emit ethylene as they ripen. And if you've got multiple fruit together, then they can act upon each other to accelerate the ripening. So the colloquial way that we say it is one bad apple spoils the bunch, right? But yes, it's a very common practice to vent ethylene outside of rooms in order to kind of maintain the freshness of the product for longer. However, an apple will ripen, any fruit is going to ripen, and it's going to emit ethylene. So the way that we look at ethylene is kind of a communication signal of the fruit. It's telling us how mature it is, and we can intercept that. And because it's the first physiological indicator that a fruit emits as it's ripening, it gives us a proactive indicator of the maturity.
Okay, yeah, thank you very much.
Other questions? So who is your, I mean, you talked about quite a few different kinds of customers, whether it's the packers, the growers, the retail. I mean, how would you sort those out in terms of priorities, Katherine?
Yeah, so packing is our bread and butter market. These are the customers we've worked with for about 3 years now. And so packing is always kind of going to be our focus. However, from a market sizing perspective, retail is by far our biggest opportunity. And so as a company going forward, our primary focus would be a more downstream supply chain player like retail, who incurs the majority of the loss as they are closest to the final product.
Hey, Jonathan has a question. Do you want to just come on line and ask your question directly, Jonathan, or do you want me to ask it for you? Let me read it for you. Is there any proprietary IP in the sensors, and what's the revenue pricing model?
Yep, so there is a proprietary IP. Basically, it's very difficult to sensitively and accurately measure these emissions that fruits emit as they ripen. And so our whole intellectual property is based around how we did that. Basically, we took a biological approach. We thought, why create man-made substrates that kind of bind in non-specific ways? Let's hack what fruits have been doing for millions of years. So we actually use proteins found in fruits in our sensing technology in order to sense this ethylene gas, and that's our intellectual property. In terms of revenue and pricing model, we charge kind of a subscription fee for data access to the information our sensors collect. So in packing, we charge per room, per year, or per season, if you will. So whenever fruits are picked off the tree, which for apples is just about now, is when we start installing our product in these storage rooms.
So you just got an offer to connect you with a marketplace in Mexico, Katherine, but I'll let you deal with that directly. One last question for Nolan, because we're running out of time. So Nolan, what was your thought process when you invested in Katherine's company?
Yeah, I mean, having spent, before I joined the venture group here, having been on the grower side and the packer side, this was something that, we had always looked at post-harvest tech as ways to really extend and optimize quality. And we've seen a number of technologies on the post-harvest treatment side, but not so much on the data side, and the ones we had seen on the data side were, at least from what we had seen, nothing everything was really kind of off the shelf. And so for Strella, it was really being able to see this really novel IP and technology, and the ability, the belief that we have is being able to connect the grower packer downstream, and seeing the vision that Strella had, and the feedback we got from customers. We were really excited to join the team.
Well, thank you very much for that presentation. I think we're running out of time, but congratulations on your success to date, Katherine, and thanks for introducing Nolan.